Hey YouTube, we're out here at the goat pasture today. I'm going to make a little video. Been a video that I've been wanting to make for a while, and I know some people watching have wanted to see for a little while. And so we're going to talk today and do a little demonstration about training your goats to electric fence. So in my operation, I graze my goats behind just 2 strands of polywire. I subdivide my pastures with that, and some of my actual perimeter fences that are too poor to hold goats, I'll actually offset a temporary fence just right in front of that or inside of that permanent fence and make it goat tight that way. So because of this, I've been able to do a lot of things with my grazing that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise, primarily just due to fencing. So it's opened up a lot of opportunities to me. And so if I had been using electric net or more wires than what I am right now, it would get to the point where it would be too cumbersome. We're on it just depends on what part of the world you're in, but we're in a somewhat of a bigger landscape here. A lot of times I'll be putting up anywhere from half a mile to a mile, or sometimes even more than a mile of temporary polywire fence to complete a paddock. So that's quite a bit of fence, and because of that, electric net and multiple wire or several wires of polywire aren't an option, just because it's too time consuming and too cumbersome. So we're going to walk over here and show you my setup for getting these goats trained. And I will say there's more than one way to go about this, of course, and I'm just showing you the way that I did it. I'll go ahead and preface before I explain my way. Another good way to do this is to have your goats inside of a small corral that's got very good fences on it, and offset with a polywire, electric polywire offset off the main fence, 8 to 12 inches, and leave those goats in that corral for probably 3 days, and let them experience that fence on their own. But with my situation, or maybe yours too, you might not just have access to those corrals real easy. Feed may be an issue. If all your feed's out in the pasture and you're not really interested in hauling feed to your animals, then that's not as much of an issue for a long period of time like that. So with that said, we'll go over here and I'll show you my setup for in the pasture of getting them broke, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. So if you look down the fence here, I've got some polywire offset from the main fence. Roughly 8 to 12 inches is what we're kind of shooting for. You don't want it right up against the fence, but you don't want it real far off either. So one of the number one important elements to doing this is the permanent fence that you're up against. Okay, this is one of my good fences, and it's quite a fence. This is a 2x4 mesh wire fence, and so it's about as goat tight of a fence as you could probably get. And you certainly don't need this fence to do what I'm showing you, but you need some sort of solid net wire, something that a goat just really, even putting a lot of pressure on it, can't get through. So in order for this to work, that's one of the things that you have to have in place to get this done. Obviously, like the rest of my fencing operation, I simply tie my reels up to the permanent fence and make that work that way, and then I've got my temporary stepping posts down the line. The second piece to this puzzle that you have to have in order for this to work is the correct amount of volts running through your fence. And for me, in my opinion, that's 7,000 plus volts, or 7 kV. Generally, my fence is in that neighborhood. Sometimes, depending on the day, depending on where on the wire I'm at, I might get 8 kilovolts, maybe 8.5. But 7 is a pretty good standard for making this work. So we'll go ahead and we'll check our fence right now with this fault finder I have that's really awesome. And you see I'm running 6.5. So that's not really as much as I'd want. I tested it earlier before we started shooting, and I was reading 7. So got even less on that. So This fence isn't as hot as what I'd like it to be right now. I'm not sure why it's really reading as little as it is, probably because I got the camera out. But we're gonna go ahead and shoot this video anyhow. And so like I say, it doesn't mean it's not gonna work. See, we got 6.5 there, there's 7.5. So these polywires, sometimes you'll get a slightly different reading, just where on the polywire you're at, so that there's a little bit of error in there. But as you can see, we're around that 7 kilovolt area is what we're shooting for. So, you know, the kilovolts, the solid perimeter fence, those are 2 elements you have to have. And then what we're going to do to get these goats up here is we're going to put out an attractant. We're going to pour out some 3/8 inch 20% cubes. So they're it's just a protein cube is all it is. And we'll pour this out right here in front of this fence, the whole length of this fence down here. And all these goats, because they know what it is. Their sack broke, or feed sack broke. They know what a feed sack is. They'll come to it. They'll swarm up here, and they'll all get on this fence. And so what you'll have then is, you know, a lot of pushing and shoving and things like that, and they'll be up against that fence, and they'll get hit by that fence, and they'll bounce off of it, and they'll whelp a little bit, and then they'll come right back and go to it again. The fourth part to this thing is that you can't just do this one day and then your goats are broke. It doesn't work that way at all. And when I broke these goats to the polywire, it took me about 5 to 6 days in a row of doing this exact procedure here. It's a repetition thing. You know, these goats have to interact with this wire multiple times before they get it locked into their brain, their subconscious, I guess, and know what this is and have respect for it. So don't think that you can do this once or twice or probably even 3 times and have long-term success. You need to do almost a week of this, you know, every day, of constantly bringing them up to the wire and showing it to them, and having that same experience again and again every day. So with all that said, we'll get some feed sacks here. We'll pour them out for these goats, and you guys can kind of see the live action of how this works, okay? So we should have showed you some footage now of these goats encountering that electric fence and just kind of what all that looks like. Earlier, one thing I wanted to mention was the importance of that fence. When these goats, when they hit that electric, especially for the first time, when they're unfamiliar with it and don't know how to react to it, a goat's tendency is to go forward. They don't really back away from pressure that much. They really like to go forward and push through something, and that's why you see a lot of goats with their heads hung in fences. If you know, like a 6x6 mesh wire kind of fence, you'll see goats get their heads hung in that, and that's because they push forward to pressure a lot, and rather than backing away from it. So it's real important, like I say again, for that permanent fence behind your temporary fence, your temporary electric fence, to be solid enough that those goats can hit it, you know, jump into it, and it's going to knock them back, because that's part of the process of those goats really believing that they can't get through that electric fence. They feel that hit, they try to jump through it, and that permanent fence is there to stop them and turn them around, to where literally in their mind, mentally, they just were pushed back by that electric fence. So that's a very important aspect to it. Not to mention, you don't want to chase goats around in this process on the other side of the fence. So anyhow, I think the rest of it, you know, is, you know, you kind of watch the film and you can kind of see what we're doing here. I'd be happy to answer some more questions about this process. Like I say, I'll emphasize one more time. The biggest deal is to do this multiple times. You know, probably 5 to 7 days worth of this in a small amount of time. So, with that said, as always, I enjoy making these videos for you. I'm looking forward to the next one, and everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you on the next one. Bye now.